Hello. We have won the die roll, and we have a great hand. Our hand's actually not that great, so we could really use a untapped land, but we're going to keep it. This hand is going to be absolutely excellent with at least one untapped land. And if we can get access to 2 untapped land, then we just literally have the nut draw on the play. So, Jaddy Offshoot looks like we're up against a ramp deck. And this will do. So, considering that my Duskwatch Recruit and my Sylvan Advocate both can't attack through the Jaddy Offshoot, I'm going to cast the Duskwatch Recruit first, in hopes that there's some potential that it might flip on my opponent's turn. No such luck. If we can get lucky and hit another untapped mana source, we're going to be in great shape, and we did. Small chance he doesn't block, but only a small chance. So one of the nice things about this deck is I know that my opponent has a Chandra from the Oath of Nissa, and unlike the Bant Company deck and a lot of the other smaller white aggressive decks, my deck can just, bounce back after a sweeper. And Gideon is always a super tough thing for these ramp decks to deal with. My opponent's hand doesn't seem like it's been particularly great thus far. He's going to be able to Chandra next turn, but that's not actually going to be super great for him. So I'm going to make this a creature. I'm going to bash with everything. My opponent's going to take a ton of damage, and then I'm going to play Sylvan Advocate with my Dromoka's command up. And even my opponent's... Oops. Oh yeah, I get to cast that for 1 less. Oh well, no matter. Still getting used to the new cards. When this is flipped, all my creatures cost 1 less. But yeah, even a Chandra here isn't really the end of the world. Is he going to -4 out of fear for Dromoka's command? And X equals 3. So my opponent has cast 1 spell. I think that the card that I want to save is this Howler. I don't think my opponent's going to cast a second creature this turn, so... Or second spell, I should say. You could have an Oath, but... So this means that... 2... So I'm 1 mana short of playing this as a morph and unflipping it. Pretty nice. I can put him to 2, but it's certainly worth it to kill this Chandra. So... And It makes sense to use this now, because if I draw something like a Sylvan Advocate, I can actually play it. Oh, I can't even activate that yet. Getting used to the new cards. So I'm going to play this face down because it gives me the offhand chance of being able to flip it up and get the other Deathmist Raptor back. And it's just like more power and toughness on the board. Ooh, Collected Company is a great draw here. So I don't think that there's any reason for me to fire it off now. So I'm just going to activate my Gideon. Bash. And I have to a moment that this Collected Company is just going to be the end for my opponent. He's got 4 cards in hand, but he has just not had enough time to cast all of them. That is going to gain 7 life, which is pretty nice, but 10 life actually with the Jaddy offshoot. It's a pretty powerful play. Buys him a lot of time. Let's see what I get off my company. So, some pretty good cards. I think it's probably... I want things that can attack through the Jaddy offshoot. And a Dromoka's command off the top would be phenomenal. So basically what I'm wondering here is how worth it is to have this Duskwatch Recruiter. I have 6 mana. It's probably worth it actually just get the Duskwatch Recruiter and then the Deathmist Raptor. If I draw a Dromoka's command, my opponent's dead. Yeah, so I'm going to get those 2. It's the best way to reload. The one nice thing about doing it the other way is that it would force my opponent to block and lose his Jaddy offshoot. Makes a huge difference either way. I just want to get more things on the board. And this way, he's going to need a lot more than just a Chandra to stabilize. The fact that he's at 3 is a huge problem. I mean 6, excuse me. But I have 4 threats. This clue is also a pretty big deal too. Not only am I adding more and more onto the board and stocking my graveyard up with Deathmist Raptors, but this clue is going to be a pretty reasonable top deck. This is certainly my opponent's path to stabilizing. He's gotten a World Breaker. So, not a particularly exciting top deck. So I have a few options here. I can crack my clue, which unfortunately doesn't do a whole lot here. I think I'll just activate this, play my Sylvan Advocate. Oh, that's unfortunate. I know that I'm going to crack my clue anyway. Might as well just do it now. It might just be a land drop. That's kind of like a land drop. So my opponent's going to play World Breaker next turn, and I'm still not going to have particularly good attacks, but at least I'll be able to build up my mana and get more and more activations out of this Duskwatch Recruiter. Now if my opponent has a Chandra, it'll be quite good. It's pretty decent too. Wow, so I might actually lose this one. So this seems a little weird to me. Certainly not going to block. I think he's just going to play the World Breaker and sweep away my board anyway, but I'm surprised he didn't do that initially. I guess that explains it. Wow, these Nissa renewals actually did a ton of work for my opponent. My opponent's life gain was kind of out of control. So this Kozilek's return is pretty annoying because it means no matter what I put on the board here is likely to get swept away. Thankfully I can get this Dromoka's command. So we may not actually be dead yet, except for the fact that we have like no more cards left in our library. So if for some reason our opponent doesn't attack with Ulamog, we can flip up our Den Protector, get Dromoka's command back, save our creatures, and also get the additional Deathmist Raptors into play. So we'll certainly play to that out. But it's an unlikely scenario. Fortunately, this is indestructible. I guess it's not on the stack yet. Alright, so I cast Dromoka's command, and preventing the damage was not an option. Did I just... whatever. We were dead anyway if my opponent played properly, so... not exactly sure what happened there. Moto. Alright, so for matchups like this, I actually like trimming down on some number of the collected companies and bringing in more of the Gideons. The Gideons are a very good threat, whereas collected company, it is a good card, but you end up running into a situation where it is likely to like all your stuff will just get swept away anyway. I like bringing in the Stasis Snares, even though they get tagged by the larger threats, like World Breaker and Ulamog. They still end up being a good way to just make it so at least they don't have them for one turn. And I think that's all I want to do. My opponent had more stuff. I could consider keeping in the Tragic Arrogances. It could be useful if he has like a Jotty Offshoot and an Ulamog out, but I feel like the Stasis Snare is going to be more important. There's also a lot of value in having Hidden Dragonslayer, but For the most part, the things that I'm worried about are Ulamog and Chandra. The only thing that Hidden Dragonslayer usually will hit is the World Breaker. Sometimes they'll have like a Dragon Lord Atarka, but in that case, the Atarka's usually done the damage already, so it may seem a little unusual, but I like... Actually, the Anafenzas are probably not at their best. Hidden Dragonslayer is probably about as good. That'll do. Alright, here we go. So last game we had a pretty powerful hand that did quite well, but our opponent had a kind of a fairly unique set of cards that allowed him to gain enough life so that sweeping the board was all he needed to do. So we had a bit of an issue getting disconnected, but now we're back. And what I was saying before is basically just that we had a good hand, but our opponent had the right combination of life gain and the right sweepers at the right time. But we did battle through, what was it, like 2 Chandras, a Kozilek's Return, and an Ulamog, so I have to imagine our opponent's hand would have beat basically any creature deck. This hand is shaping up to be quite good. So Advocate into Deathmist Raptor is certainly one of the more resilient things that we can do. And depending on the circumstances, we may find ourselves in a situation where we want to use the Dromoka's command earlier rather than later to kill like a Jadi offshoot and that Oath of Nissa. Generally speaking, I like saving the Dromoka's commands for a Chandra minus or a Kozilek's Return. But it's just sort of whatever you can do that you think is going to maximize damage and make it most likely that you're going to win the game is what you should do. The first Kozilek's Return is usually not that great. A lot of my stuff is 2 toughness, or more than 2 toughness, excuse me. If we get to a situation where my opponent only has 1 mountain, I might consider firing off the Dromoka's command before he gets to 6 mana, but I feel like that's pretty unlikely. My opponent seems to be thinking here. I wonder if he has some sort of removal or like a fog effect. Unfortunately, we're kind of out of gas, which is a little unfortunate. We are certainly hoping to have something like a Gideon at this point. So I think that's fine. I'm much more worried about Chandra. Also, if Kozilek's Return is just going to be a 1-for-1, it's like kind of fine. So here, I think it's fine to just put a +1/+1 counter and fight, because our Advocate is going to be able to get big enough so that well, actually, no, I guess we want to put it on the Advocate, because then it'll be 6 toughness, and neither Chandra nor a flashback Kozilek Return will kill it. So we get to knock our opponent to 1. Opponent's draw seems extremely weak, and neither Chandra, well, Chandra won't save him. So that game, our opponent's draw was basically just awful. And it's probably worth it to have like one less Dromoka's Command and one more Collected Company. I think that'll do. This is certainly a fine hand. One thing that's nice about you guys being able to watch me at the beginning of the standard season is you're gonna see me try out a lot of different things, and you're gonna be able to get to learn a little bit about my thought process of how I go about tuning things. Like for example, one notable omission from this deck list is I have no Archangel Avacyn, which I played at the Invitational. And also, I have no Declaration of Stone. So the reasoning for that is the Declaration of Stones really don't like that much. I do not want to give my opponents a card. And it's basically only good against token strategies, and there just weren't that many token strategies, and I have Tragic Arrogance for those things anyway. And then Archangel Avacyn, while it's an extremely powerful card, it wasn't helping me do anything that I couldn't otherwise already do. So that was a bit of a problem. So basically, for this week, I'm looking to see if I can get away with not playing those things. So one thing that's notable about this draw is I made sure that I had two white sources as my turn 2 play, just in case of a Knight of the White Orchid coming up in a situation where I could ramp up. And the other thing to note is it's pretty important that this Sylvan Advocate has vigilance, because if I played Gideon here and both my creatures were tapped, there's some way that maybe I lose my Gideon. But in this situation, there's basically no way that I can lose my Gideon. And if my opponent plays Chandra, I'm going to be able to kill it. Ooh, Tark is good. So Tark is a good way to kill Gideon. This is a game that's probably going to be pretty hard for me to win. My opponent has a World Breaker. These are obviously going to get pretty bad for me. So I just want to make this a creature. Passion. In game 1, my opponent's draw was just good enough. In game 2, my opponent's draw was horrible. In this game, my opponent's draw seems to be quite nice. So here, I have an interesting option. Making a random token doesn't seem particularly relevant. I think probably the best thing for me to do is to make an emblem. And I'm a little afraid of casting both my creatures, but I can't really afford to play things too slowly. So I'm just going to run my stuff out there and basically hope that I live to untap with it. My opponent has a Chandra, he'll be able to sweep my board, but at least I force him to lose his Chandra. And Atarka will be able to snipe my Gideon, but there's nothing really I could do about that anyway. These Nissa's renewals with the Jadi offshoots are like kind of insane. They're just like gain 10 life. So I can actually kill the Atarka with my Deathmist Raptor, which is kind of sweet. And I'm not sure how much I actually want to do that. So let's see here. I have a few options with this Sylvan Advocate. This Den Protector. So I have access to 6 mana. I could play flip up the Den Protector and get back the Gideon, but I don't really want to play the Gideon with the Atarka in play. So I guess I start by simply attacking with both. Having the Deathmist Raptor fight the Atarka is kind of a freebie because it's just going to come back with the Deathmist Raptor anyway. And I guess I don't need to do any of it yet. I can wait to see what my opponent does. I don't really want to take 8 damage though. But I think what I'm going to end up doing is using the Dromoka's command to have my Deathmist Raptor fight the Dragon Lord Atarka. And, yeah. So if my opponent just has 2 Kozilek's returns, I'm going to basically get blown out here. Oops. +1/+1 counter on this, then I want this to fight that. And now I'll be able to get the Gideon and the Deathmist Raptor back if I choose. So, yeah, I believe if my opponent -4 there, I would be able to flip this up, and it would actually have... No, it would have the same amount of toughness. But this does bode well for me. My opponent doesn't really have enough mana to do anything too devastating this turn. Guess he could actually still has enough to cast a World Breaker, given the fact that Shrine of the Forsaken Gods can tap for 2. Looks like he's just going to try to gain a bunch of life. I think the best thing to get is the Gideon, although you could certainly make an argument for the Dromoka's commands. So I don't think I'm going to have enough time to flip up the Deathmist Raptor, so I'll just get it face up. And my Den Protector will be able to snipe the Chandra on her own, which is pretty nice also. Ooh, another Gideon. So let's see here. So if my opponent doesn't draw anything, I will be able to make quick work of his life total. The fact that Gideon is... Oops, I did not activate my Gideon. LOL. I was going to say the fact that my Gideon is spitting out 3/3s is pretty relevant, but obviously it's not as good if you forget to activate. And this is just an insane amount of life. It's another Chandra. Wow. Well, my opponent has infinite life. I have, not a whole lot going on. And my clock is obviously ticking down. I think that I want to save this Stasis Snare for something juicy. I don't really want to play my land because of Tireless Tracker. There's a chance that we actually just make it through. Now I am going to play my land just because if I get a Duskwatch Recruit, it'll mean I'll be able to activate it. So pretty good. So that does nothing at the moment. Assume my opponent just has a second one. Yeah. So we can refuel. This has to find some action for our opponent. Given the fact that he's just pulled so many lands out of his deck, I have to imagine, yeah, World Breaker's a good one. So this will clear our Gideon and both of our creatures, which is unfortunate. But we can still kind of rebuild. Fortunately, we are running out of time. It'd be pretty amazing if we managed to make it through. We are almost there. Dromoka's command is a nice way to secure us from a potential sweeper as well. is the fastest clock. Dead in 2 turns. I think it's more important to hold up the Dromoka's command rather than play the additional threat. If we do win this, that's like one for the ages, but a World Breaker off the top would have been devastating. I mean, World Breaker, bring back World Breaker, bring back Dragonlord Atarka, probably would have done it, but we managed to fight through. That was pretty absurd. I did not think I would win that. How many Nissa's rules did we have? 1, 2, 3? 3 Nissa's renewals. And all 3 Jadi offshoots? Pretty absurd. On to the next one.